Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
Let's go to the next section over here, which is Azure Blueprints. Now the name itself over here is self-explanatory. When you say blueprint, this is actually a template that we are creating for the next set of environment or other for other customers. See, because as solution providers, we have been learning from our mistakes. As a solution provider, we have been observing keenly, saying that this is what mistakes we have made. This was our learnings. I will not say mistakes. This was our learnings as far as the prior project was concerned, right? And understanding from them. Let's go to the next project. But in this project, we will make sure we are much better. We avoid those kind of issues. We avoid those kind of problems that we have created for ourselves. And in this one, we will make sure we apply all the best practices. Right. What we can do is one approach of applying these best practices would be creating a list of do's and don'ts. Ask people to follow a set of steps, create a process for this. Right? Still, there are chances of things getting missed out. What we can do over here is we can enforce these things by using a blueprint. Right? As part of blueprint, what we are doing over here is we are creating a readily available template. And through that template, we are creating all the resources. Now, when I say resources, I'm saying it would be role-based access control. It would be applying policies. It would be creation of resources. Everything is happening by a pre-existing template. That is what is referred as a blueprint. As part of blueprint, here we have all required members which will help us do this. Right? Starting on with rule assignments, followed by your policy assignments. Right. Third one that you see is usage of ARM templates over here. Using ARM templates, we are not just creating the policy, but we are also creating the resources here. Right? Along with your resources, we are grouping them into respective resource groups. All these 4 resources that we have or the food for main components that you have. These things are part of your Azure blueprints. Now, if you look at a second point over here, they're different from ARM templates. As part of ARM templates, within ARM templates, it's only about resource creation. It's not about governance. Using rule assignments, using policies, right? What you are doing is you are enforcing features or required best practices for that particular resource. Right? Rather than having these things done separately, we are combining all these things together as a single unit. That is what is referred as a blueprint. If you check for differentiation over here, we have understood what is policies. Now we want to ensure that those policies those as best practices which has helped us to survive in the previous project. We make that as part of the next environment. We make that part of our next implementation, right? And if you are looking as an architect and making sure these are consistent, these are idempotent, and we are replicating it across number of environments, the approach over here would be blueprint. Once it comes to blueprint, whenever it comes to complex projects where we have different types of environments like dev environment, test environment, right? Staging production. In most of them, the foundational aspects will remain safe. Say, for example, I need a specific type of VM, right? Now, how many instances of that VM is required? How many instances of that VM is required? That will change in production, right? Other attributes or other properties would remain safe. Rather than sitting back creating all these things all over again, it will become easier if we can create a template out of it and apply that template to various resources over here. Let's take a look at how do you create a. Now, within the portal, let's go to blueprints. Now here, if you see, there are already predefined members over here. You can check for which are the published blueprints. What are assigned blueprints as of now? These are set of previously created resources, and you will be able to see respective versions of them. If you want to create a new blueprint, you can go ahead and create a blueprint over here. Let's see. There are series of pre-existing blueprints that we have, depending upon ISO standards or NIST or PCI DS. Depending upon what is your compliance requirements, what is your security requirements, what are the best practices that you would want. Here, all these things are available as blueprints over here. Let's take up a basic networking virtual network. Let's take a look. Now, within that configuration, what are the resources that you would want to add within that? What resources you want to? What aspects of blueprint you want to apply on subscription level? In terms of RBC, in terms of policies, what do you want to perform on the subscription level? Let's take a look. I want to add a contributor permission to set of groups or set of users over here. Another aspect is you see your VNet resource group. Right. What are the permissions and policies that you want to apply over here? You can do that. Any specific tiles that you would want. Along with this, within your virtual network, any specific resource that you want to create, you can mention over here by using ARM templates. If you already have a JSON file, you can upload a JSON file over here. You can specify the parameters based on your template over here. And you can make this work for you. Let's go ahead. Click on Save. Now, once it's saved, you can go ahead and publish this, and you can go ahead and apply this. Say this is right now in graph. Let's go ahead. Publish this blueprint over here. And once it is being published, next step over here is assign a blueprint. Once you assign a blueprint to a subscription or to a management group, it will create those required resources over there. While creating it, if you want to assign particular log, say for read only log, I would not recommend a read only log, because once you have the virtual network being created, the next step over there would be creation of a VA. You don't do a read only log, but create a do not delete log. In case you have all the required resources created and you don't want anybody to add anything to it other than connecting to the resource, in that case you can go for a read only log. Here we need a blueprint. It's like a wizard for us where you can proceed further. What is the prefix that you would want over here? It will be easier for you to group these members or in the resources section. Dylan Williams is one of the users which I have, or to specify senior admins, junior admins. I also have respective groups over here. For all the members in that group, I want to assign them contributor permissions. What is the address space you want? And once you are done with this, let's go ahead and click on Assign. As far as blueprint is concerned, in most of my cases, when I have done it, it always comes with experience. Experience of the domain, experience of kind of projects. One of the companies which I had worked with, and I was working as a consultant with them, they had created a niche for themselves where they said that we will specialize only in web application migration or managing web applications on Azure. They had everything which is relevant for web application. All set of policies, structures, any and everything that is required for web application migration. Obviously, with web application migration, whatever database the user might have. They had readily available templates only for web application migration. No virtual machines, only PaaS-based web application. They had their entire template ready for doing the same thing. Similarly now and again it was based on their experience and domain. And even especially when they came to web application, it was about there is lot of medical organizations. Right? They were specializing in that area as well. Like in India, we have DOR, Reddy's or Lupin Labs. They were specializing in that area. For medical organizations, it would hardly take them 2 or 3 days maximum. Once the domain SL and all those things have been ready, they were easy. They were quickly moving those things into Azure. Right. We will. And as a consulting organization, one can decide what is your area of specialization. We are done with this. It will take some time. Sorry, done? Here, if you see, it has got the resources created. CFG NSG blueprint, CFG virtual network blueprint. And via this blueprint, it has already created resources for us. It has also got the subnet over here. CFG subnet blueprint. Everything that is needed for my environment. I have already got it over here via blueprint. If I want to create a virtual machine here, 1, 2, 3, how many number of virtual machines? I can upload those. I can upload those. I can upload those. I can upload those. IAM templates. And through those, by using that IAM template within the blueprint, I can create the resources over here. Let's move further. Now, apart from these policies that you have created, whether it is in terms of encryption policies, decryption policies, right? Network policies, right? You are specifying a tag. Meta information policies. For from compute perspective, what type of machines one should be creating? Right. Specifying those policies. Now, this is one of some of the things which we have discussed earlier. Once it comes to creation of resources and after creation of resources, security is another important aspect. When I say security, one question over here could be, haven't we already specified security? Haven't we ensured that the user who's accessing this content is part of the Azure Active Directory? The user who's accessing this content should have appropriate authorization being done by using rule-based access control. If that part is already being taken care, what is the security when you say here? In this module, when we say security, we are not talking about authentication, authorization. Here we are talking about something called as Key Vault. Right. And along with Key Vault, what we are looking at, another aspect is Managed Identities. Now, what are these two components responsible for? If you look at other security requirements, one of the major security requirements that we have and that we have been talking about time and again is encryption. Right. If you recall, disk encryption, we already mentioned about. Using a policy, we can enforce a disk encryption using a policy. We enforce disk encryption. When you are enforcing the disk encryption, where do you get this encryption key from? Right. When we are talking about websites or web applications, there we have been talking about SL certificates. Right. But if there are number of websites, and for each, for different set of websites, I have different SSL certificates. Where am I supposed to store those certificates? Where do I store all those certificates? Along with this, when you are talking about very encryption policies, right, I have to renew an encryption key after every 45 days, something like that. How do I apply those things over here? Once it comes to identity, in terms of identity, there are no such. There are policies in terms of passwords. Changing of password. There is no policy for. There are no options or no provisions for encryption over there because Azure Active Directory primarily focuses identity management, user creation, group creation, those things. Apart from this, security has other aspects as well, which involves encryption key, SSL certificates. Third aspect that you have over here. Integration keys. Right. Another aspect over here would be integration keys. When you are integrating across number of services, like you must have seen in storage account, you have access keys over there, right? SSL tokens over there. Similar to that, other services have their own set of tokens, their own set of resources. How do we incorporate that? Where do we store those keys? How do we incorporate that? How do we incorporate that? Integration keys or service keys that you have. Where do we store those things? These are other security requirements that you will have. Right. Keeping these kind of security requirements in Azure gives you a service called as keyword. Within the keyword, we can store or we can solve the security concerns which are applied to the server apart from identity management, which are APAM, identity and access management. Let's first understand about Key Vault. Look at the implementation and then we will get into managed identities. If you look at Key Vault is associated with your security center and there is a complete resource that you have for managing security within the environment by using something called a security center. I will come to section a bit later in terms of what is security center all about and what are the features inside. But one thing that we need to understand once it comes to Key Vault. Once it comes to Key Vault, the core purpose of Key Vault is to store all these security related resources at one place, which is in terms of encryption keys that you would want. All these encryption keys will be stored at one location. All the integration keys that we have been talking about, SL certificate that we have been talking about, now all these things will be stored at one place. If you look at the services given by Key Vault, it gives you storage mechanism for 3 resources which will help you for encryption, decryption. That's one. Second thing, it will help you for storing number of resources. That's second. And third one, your integration keys, which is called secret. These are 3 things that you can store within Key Vault. Is this clear to everyone? Now comes the next question. If you have all these important aspects stored at one place, how do you secure that resource itself? If you say the vault is consisting of all the passwords, or what is consisting of all the encryption, decryption keys, which means any who has access to that extract information or can work with any resource that I have on my environment. Am I correct for that? That person or that group will have access to all the contents within the environment. It is important to protect this key vault itself. Right. To protect this key vault, we should have something called as access permissions. For this environment, we should have set of access permissions to the key vault. Over here, keeping that context in mind, if you see the diagram, it says there should be different set of key or a different set of access permissions. Azure developer, right? Each of these will have different set of acts that they can perform on the key vault. When I say permissions, doesn't mean they will have permission to anything and everything. There should be restricted permissions to each of these, right? To understand that, let's create a key vault over here. Let me go to my resource group. Within my resource group, let me add a key vault over here. Or I can go to the search window. Let me go to key vaults. If resource key vault, whatever name you want to give, If you look at the region, let me mention region as Southeast Asia. Now, if you look at the pricing tier, I can have a standard pricing tier or I can go for premium. With premium, I can support hardware security modules as ISM-backed keys. Remember, you have various devices, right? Through that devices, whatever code gets generated or ISM-backed keys, I can store that onto keyword. Now this becomes a big issue. If you have a resource associated with keyword, if you have some data associated with keyword, and what if the keyword itself gets deleted? Right now, that could be a big problem. You can specify soft delete. You can specify how many days you want that information to be stored. Apart from this, you can put a lock on the keyword that nobody should be able to delete the keyword, right? Some of these things, some of these rules you can enforce on a keyword. Let's go ahead. If you see the access policy over here, I can specify whichever resource I want. I want to use this keyword for disk encryption, template deployment, virtual machine deployment. I can specify rule-based access control, right? Whatever other relevant rules for keyword I can use that I would recommend. Let's go for Vault access policy, and here if you see for each of these members, for a user like Om Prakash, there is a key permissions, secret permissions, certificate permissions. You can add access policies for other people as well. And when you are giving permissions to other groups, users, here what we are doing is we are giving them relevant permissions that you would want. Now it's up to you as a user what permissions you want to provide to a specific user. It's not like any other resource where you give either full access or you give zero access. It's not like that. Here you can say, I will decide what permissions I want to give to the user or a group. It can be specific to one of these three components: key permissions, secret permission or secret permission, and even within that, what actions the user can perform. Does it make sense to everyone? Key Vault is one of the important resources that you have for securing and storing all this information into a centralized place. Here you already have set of pre-existing template. For SharePoint Online, for Exchange Online, right? Secret and certificate for management. Depending upon what template you have chosen, it will automatically select those permissions from here. You want to apply this to which user? You can mention that over here. Two users, one is Om Prakash and second is Dylan. There are two users who are getting permissions over here. If you want to provide all the permissions, you can do it from here as well. This is how you can create your respective access policies for your members over here. Whether it is a developer, whether it is a power user, normal user, administrator, for each of them, what permissions are relevant for them. You give those permissions over here. Let's move ahead. As far as this key vault is concerned, is it accessible or available to everyone, or is it available only to a circuit network? I can choose it from here. Let's go ahead. Click on Create. While this is happening, let me proceed further. Is this part clear to everyone? Developers would be retrieving the key vault keys using the specific URL, but they cannot delete it, modify it, update it. Let's say, let me connect to this key, get this key, decrypt the information, and then access it. If I want to insert something into a database which is an encrypted value, let me encrypt that details and then update that within the database, right? I can have database specific column encryption that you will work with. And that is what is possible with keyword write from a security administrator perspective. Security administrator would want to create new keys, specify the renewal policy for that right. Those things will be happening on a different panel, whereas this accessibility is happening on a different panel. If you look at the option that I mentioned earlier, secrets management, keys management, certificate management, there are three primary roles or primary aspects which Azure Key Vault will help you perform. You can store your secrets. These are integration keys which are available here. You can use HSM keys, depending upon what kind. What is the tier that you have chosen? If you have chosen a tier, which is standard tier, then ASMN is not supported, right? You have to go for a premium tier for ASM based hardware security modules. If you look at the secret types, the primary aspect over here is your certificates. Extending from certificates, you have your cryptographic keys and your secrets over here. Now, once you have this key being created, you can apply it to any of your resources that you want, which would be like your storage account. Let me show you an example of that. I have got the key vault created. Now within the key vault, I have keys, secrets, certificates. Let me go to the key section. Here if you see, you have option of either generating or importing a key. Now let me give you a use case scenario for when would you go for importing a key, right? As far as importing a key is concerned, within your on-premises environment, there also you may already have a key being used over here, which is for encryption of your on-premises data. Am I correct? Now, if I go to Azure and create a new key over here, what will happen for performing this encryption, decryption? It will take slightly longer because it has to move contents from. It has to start encrypting using a new key. Instead of performing an encryption, decryption again and again using two different set of keys, what one can do is we can go ahead and export the on-premises key and import it over here, that in both the environments we have the same key being used. Same thing can hold true for Azure as well. In on-premises, if I don't have a key, I can export this key from here, import that within on-premises, and all data encryption within on-premises will happen using the Azure Key Vault generated key right. But that will help us to have a consistency across both the environments. Does it make sense for everyone? Whatever key you want to mention over here, let's go ahead. Click on Create. We have got the key created over here as my name and key. Now let me go and apply this on the storage account like how you are mentioning about. Within storage account, guys, I am showing you the implementation of how these things will make sense for your existing resources. Creation is one aspect. Applying these keys is another aspect. Here let's go to whatever name, unique name you want to give. Let me choose the region over here. Let me take LRs over here. Let me click on Review and Create. Let me click on Review and Create. Let me create one more resource over here. We have worked with virtual machines. We know about OS disk, we know about data disk, right? I am not creating a VM. I am creating a disk over here because this will be the resource where you actually have the data being stored, right? You can make it available check for availability zones, whatever source type that you would want. I am not choosing a storage block. The reason being, if I choose storage block, I already have a storage account which is encrypted. Let me take a standard HDD, click on. Let me go for encryption over here now. Here, when you see encryption type, it asks you to specify what is the encryption type you want. Do you want encryption with customer managed key or you want double encryption? Let me choose double encryption here. When you are specifying a disk encryption set, it will ask, when you are going to do an encryption for managed disk, it will require a disk encryption set. Let's go ahead and first create a disk encryption set and then we can associate that with your disk over here. Now you will be able to realize the dependencies over here. Disk encryption set. Can you see this? When I create a disk encryption set, it will ask me for a key vault. Can you tell me which key you want me to use for this encryption? Right. I am sure you are able to figure out the dependency. For disk encryption, you require a disk encryption set. For disk encryption set, you require a key vault key. And remember, we already have created this key earlier. Using that key, I have created a disk encryption set. Using the key vault key, I have created a disk encryption set. and using this disk encryption set. Now I am going to create a disk, and then I can attach that disk, and then I can attach that disk to my virtual machine, because these are most important aspects in terms of security. Security, see again, security is not something which says if identity based security is there or privileged access management security, there is enough. Even at the lowest level where the data is getting stored, even that data should be encrypted. I am not saying Azure does not do it. Azure does it on its own, but still it is better that we apply our own security. And here, if you see, we are saying user double encryption, which means I want to leverage on the Azure facilities or Azure Encryption Plus. I want to have my own encryption mechanism as well. Now, since we have the encryption set ready, let's create a disk. And while creating a disk, I will be able to choose that encryption set. Standard. Let me go for encryption. Can you see this? Since I already have the encryption set ready, I can choose it from here. Let's go ahead. Click on Review and Create. Now what will happen is all the data which is being stored on that disk is encrypted. Now it is not a compulsion that before attaching a disk, you should encrypt it, even if that disk is already there. Even if that disk contains data still, you can do an encryption. That is not a problem here. I showed you a quick understanding of disk and how do you encrypt the disk. Let me use the same key for storage account as well. I am sure by now the storage account is ready. If I go to encryption over here, and if you will read the details, it clearly says that once it comes to Azure, Azure by default encrypts all this information. Right? There is something called as SSE Storage Service Encryption. Using Storage Service Encryption, it will automatically encrypt all the information. Data at rest, data in transit, all of these are by default secure. If you want to go beyond that here, you can use something called as Customer Managed Key. Can you see this? Can you see this? The option of Customer Managed Key, which means we are the ones as administrators who are managing that encryption key, that I should be able to reuse that key again and again. Right? I can mention the URI over here, or I can reuse the key over here. Here I can say this is my key vault. I already have a key over here. Please use this key for data encryption. Let's go ahead, click on Save. What have we done over here? We have specified a pre-existing key and we have associated that key with the storage account. All the data which is going inside that storage account will be encrypted. God forbid. But even for some reason, somebody has sneaked through the perimeter network. They have broken across with network security groups. Right? Then they go ahead and they have now access to the to the virtual machine. Within that virtual machine, I have my disk attached. On the disk, I have all the data, right? Even if they reach that information, or even like if they get those details, even there it is encrypted information. Are you getting it? What we are doing is we are enforcing number of levels of security. Does it make sense to everyone? You should have more and more levels of security. You should have more and more levels of security, right, where they are storing all that information. Even that becomes problem at times. I can help one of the scenarios which I had been through where the company was using something called as information rights management, right? And within their on-premises environment, they had gone ahead and they had gone ahead and created encryption key. But that machine has got formatted. All the data which was there, all the documents which are interpreted, all of that was unusable, right? Not just creation of the key, but management and maintenance of the key is also equally important, because if that key is lost, all the information which is relevant, which is created, you or interpret using that will be unusable. For that, we'll have to make sure we create the key effectively, and also we need to store that. Let's proceed further. This was quick look in terms of Key Vault. If you look at the terms and terminologies over here as part of your environment, here you have number of members, which is your vault owner, who is the one who has created this Key Vault, right? That owner. Again, please be careful. When I say owner does not mean the owner will have all the permissions. Like I showed you, you will have to specify what permissions the owner will have. Similarly, when you go for Azure Active Directory, based on your role-based access control, you will be specifying that these group members will have these permissions on the underlying environment. If you look at your Vault consumer, the Vault consumer could be your developer. Vault consumer will be other set of people, right, who are working with it, right. Third member that you see over here is your service principal. Let's say service principal. Service principal will involve users groups and also applications. There could be applications which are behaving as which are the service principal, and they can access these resources when and where required. That is referred as service principal. The fourth aspect that you see is your Azure tenanted. If you look at the Vault owner should be a member inside the Azure Active Directory, and they will have a respective tenanted for it. Using these resources, we can create and access contents inside the keyword and will be able to create our store. Our resources access the contents inside your keyword. Now the last aspect, which I did not mention, is about managed identities. We'll come to that section as we go ahead. From user management perspective, you have your secrets management, you have your key management over here, and your certificate management. Now for performing this management, that is storing information, getting information. We have already discussed about that as part of the resources that. I showed you that for each of these members, there are separate set of permissions that you have now. Now let me go to Managed Identity, one of the very important resources once it comes to your Azure platform. Now, before I go to Managed Identity, anyone any questions in terms of Key Vault? You have to do that. Good centralized storage for all your security related resources. That is your Key Vault. Now moving ahead and going to Azure Managed Identity. Now this was an area which I was struggling when it was being introduced, and if I'm not mistaken, this was around a year ago. Year or 6 months to a year, if I'm not mistaken. That's when it was introduced, or that's when I started working with this. The only options which we had was creating a cloud identity, creating a synchronized identity. And what is the third one? What is the third one? Guest identity. There are 3 identities which we had discussed about, and how did we create all these things? Simple, go to your Azure Active Directory. Within Azure Active Directory, go to the Users section. Go to the Users section. Go to Azure Active Directory. Go to the Users section. Go to the Group section. Create these identities are set, all these, the guest identity. I know where we will use it. Where do we use a synchronized identity with the third party, things like Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn to get the access? Am I right? Yes, that will be guest identity. I thought. Synchronize these from the on-premises, correct synchronized identities from on-premises, guest identities from Facebook or any other third-party environment. I was talking about users and groups, cloud identity, synchronized identity. Synchronized identity is from your on-premises Active Directory, and then we have guest identity, which is B2B users, B2C users. All, they are part of your guest identity. Now moving ahead with the next member over here, which is giving application permissions right. Once it comes to accessing your contents or accessing your resources, it's not only users and groups who can do that. Even applications can access it. But if you want to allow any application to access any services right in that context, you will have to do something called as app registration. Here, if I go to app registrations, can you see this? Can you see this? Here I am saying as far as the user is concerned, user is not directly connecting to the service. User will connect to the application and application in turn will connect to the service. Here, if you see I have an application being registered as SQL APP. If I go to my storage account, within my storage account, I can go to access control. I can assign a permission. I can assign a permission over here, say reader permission 2. Can you see this? I can give a reader permission to a user group or service principal, and I can select my application here. Is it making sense for everyone? How can I select this schooler here, schooler app? Because this is a pre-existing application and what it has with itself is an identity. Like users have their identity, similarly applications also have their identity. But in each of these scenarios which I am talking about, every scenario you see, I will have to do this app registration myself. I will have to create the cloud identity myself. I will have to use Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Connect as a tool and synchronize that. I will have to work with the guest identity over here, sending an invitation. They should accept the invitation, right? Who is doing the management of all these things? The management and creation of these resources is taken care by admin team. Are we getting it? This entire management is taken care by the admin team. And wherever we are doing this management, Microsoft says this is unmanaged. Unmanaged since, in sense, it is managed by the admin team. Whereas, on other hand, let me now go back to the here itself. I can show you here. If you see, assign access to user group or a service principal, right? In these scenarios, whatever you are doing, this is customer managed or this is the admin managed. I would not say customer, I would say admin managed. Whereas second set of permission that you see, you have user assigned managed identity, system assigned managed identity. Now this, when you say managed identity, what do you mean by that? When you talk about managed identity, one aspect which is very evident over here, managed identity means this is Microsoft managed. This is Microsoft managed. You don't have to manage it. Here no user or group creation is involved. No application registration is involved, right? And this is why it is called as managed identity, because it is Microsoft managed. Now moving further, once it comes to managed identity, there are two types of managed identity. One managed identity that you will see over here is called as user assigned managed identity, and second is system assigned managed identity, user assigned managed identity. User assigned managed identity, and second is system assigned managed identity. Now here what we can do is, now using these components, using these resources over here, user assigned managed identity, system assigned managed identity, we can go ahead and specify permissions. What permissions do you want via these managed identity? Permission management we have to do, right. Creation of this identity will be taken care by Microsoft behind the scene. But once it comes to giving permissions, what permissions it will have, what permissions that identity will have, that is something that we will have to define. Let me proceed further. Once it comes to Azure Managed Identity, I think this part is clear with everyone. If you look at Managed Identity, it is combination of Azure AD authentication and your role-based access control, right? That's why I was talking about the last part which I said. Along with these types, we will have to assign permissions. And when I say assign permissions, here we are talking about rule-based access control. And that holds true for both these members. It holds true for user assigned managed identity and also for system assigned managed identity. It is a combination of Azure AD authentication and your rule-based access control. You don't have to manage any users. You don't have to manage any certificates or any SL over here. All these things will be taken care by Microsoft itself behind the scene. Now here, what will happen is there is no email address like how you would have your application name. Like I showed you SQL APP, right? Like I showed you Dylan Williams at the rate OMP something, someone Microsoft.com or ABWise.com. Whatever domain information that you have, those things are not there in managed identity. Here you will have something called as object IDs. Any managed identity that gets created will have a client ID or object ID. Here you will have your object ID or client ID over here. Now this object ID or client ID is associated with service instance. Now everyone, please be very careful with this. This is a very important aspect. Once it comes to this object ID or client ID, which gets created itself, like even in case of app registration, you might have noticed there is something called as client ID. Am I right? If you all missed out that, we will show it to you app registration. You are not showing here. Let me go to app registration. App registration within app registration. Can you see this? There is an application ID or client ID. From a user understanding perspective, there is a name, but behind the scene it is mapped as a client ID, some unique value which gets generated behind the scene. Now, same thing holds true with object ID or client ID over here, but this unique value or a grid which gets generated is associated with a service instance. Now, what is the meaning of a service instance? Let me put it as a service or resource instance. Right now, this is a very important concept. Once it comes to managed identity, now whenever you are creating a web application, whenever you are creating a VM, whenever you are creating a key vault, you will always create an instance of that. Am I right now? In my current scenario, if I go to all resources, this Sopash keyword, this is actually an instance of keyword. Am I correct with that? Sopash keyword is an instance of keyword. It is one implementation of that service. Similarly, say if I look at a disk, the disk which I had created, so patch disk 1 is instance of this disk. Is this part clear to everyone? This is one instance, the disk. Is this part clear to everyone? This is the actual class and Apache disk 1 is the instance of that class. Same thing also with keyword as well. Once it comes to the identity, this identity is not with a service. The identity is with the instance of that. Is this part clear to everyone? I could have a website which is a web app, which is Subash web instance 1 or disk instance disk 1, key vault 1 or whatever number I want to mention, whatever name I want to mention. Now this is called as instance. Let's move ahead and let me go back to storage account within storage account within storage account and let me take up another resource over here. Let me take a web application and while this web application is getting created, I can help. We can go ahead to the managed instance we can go through managed identity and understand another details inside that and understand another details inside that runtime stack. .NET Core region, Southeast Asia. Let me click on review and create. Now you'll realize there are 3 resources over here. There are 3 resources over here. There are 3 resources over here. First resource is a web application. Second resource over here is storage account, right? And the third resource over here, right? Now third resource over here is the keyword. 3 resources over here. There are web application storage account and keyword, right? Now let's go to managed identity. If you see, there are 2 types of managed identities. One is system assigned and second is user assigned. Now, If you see over here, to create this identity, the first thing to do is you need to go to your Key Vault, or you need to go any of your services. Go to the identity section and generate this identity. Here, if you see, it is using system assigned managed identity, and we are generating it from here by turning it on. Test v1-12 is an individual book entry machine, and here we are creating a system assigned managed identity. Now, once this is being done, we can go ahead and we can assign permissions to the service for this particular managed identity. Let me see if my web application is ready. You can do this by using a virtual machine. You can do this by using an application. It's up to you which resource you want to use for generating the identity and which resource you want to use for assigning this identity. Let me go to identity section. Can I see over here? Under settings section, I have identity. Within identity section, let me generate a system assigned managed identity, and you see there is no form or no input values over here. You just turn it on. Click on save. It says enabling system assigned manager identity. This is something which will be done behind the scene. This will be done behind the scene. It is all managed by Microsoft on its own. We are not doing any of these things. Now here, if you see the object ID, this is the object ID being assigned to it. Now, what is the role that you want to assign to this member? What is the role that you want to assign to this member? What is the role that you want to assign to this member? What is the role that you want to assign to this member? What is the role that you want to assign to this member? What is the role that you want to assign to this member? What we are doing is the role that you want to assign to this member. Those are also associated between two services instances. Once it is done, let's go back to the storage account. Let's go to Identity and Access Control. Can you see here? Sabash Web App 1 has a contributor permission on this role, on this resource. right? This is what we have done. If you want to do it from here also, you can do that. Go to Add Role Assignments, Contributor Permission. Assign access to. Can I see this system assigned managed identity? It says this is the resource here at Sobash Web App E1. Right, contributor access. Assign access to app service. Here, what you're doing is you are choosing a service. You are choosing a service, but for that service, you would have already generated aid. You have already generated an identity for it, which is a managed identity. And this can be done for app service deployment, slots, container instances, data factory logic app, Signal, or virtual machines. It can be done for number of such compute resources, number of such data resources that we have. What I showed you right now was how do you associate or how do you generate a system assigned managed how do you generate a system assigned managed identity, and how do we associate that with your source. I have generated a system assigned managed identity on the web application, and to that identity we are giving permissions on the resource over here. It is between two resources, what permissions that you are giving to that particular instance. That's what we are doing over here. If you look at the way how it works in terms of managed identities, you'll have your code right. And once it comes to managed identities, here we are not specifying any details directly saying that through our code we are getting connected to the environment. We are working with that here. What we are doing is we are specifying the code over here, and with that code we are connecting to the specific service without having to worry whether it has permissions or it does not have a permission. When you try to access that service, it will check for a local service token, see if the app is being registered or it has a managed identity, and using that managed identity, it will connect to your service. Now all these local token service or all these resources are being already associated with your Active Directory, and it is being managed by Microsoft itself. Rather than you having to manage it, rather than you having to do the app registration, Microsoft is doing it for you behind the scene, right? That's the entire process over here, which happens in context of managed identity. How will it help you? This will help you move out the credentials out of the code that you don't mention this in config file or anywhere, because these config files can be stolen or can be taken up. That could be a challenge. We are removing that. We are not having to do lot of these things ourselves, like Active Directory registration of applications. Those things is automatically done by you, done for you. It is using a local messy endpoint. Once you have registered yourself, and when you are accessing that content through an application, it will check if that application has permissions or not. There are two permissions that we are looking at. One permission is a user permission, and second permission is the application permission. One is user identity and second is application identity IDT. Now, please understand this carefully. We are all in an era of mobile devices, am I right? On the mobile device, We have many applications which are there. Do all applications have the same set of permissions as a user? No. Does all the application have same permissions as a user? If yes, which means every application can go and modify the user's password. Does it happen that way? It does not, right? User always have a much better, much higher permissions as compared to the application. Here, what we are talking about is the application level permission. Here we are talking about application level permission. Your application will have specific set of permissions on storage account or other set of resources that you have within your Azure environment. That's the core purpose of managed identity. Microsoft behind the scene will manage how these identities get created and how they are mapped to the underlying resource. This is all about managed identity, and I have showed you a few examples of how do you generate a managed identity. This is all something which I already showed you. In terms of certificate, I don't have a certificate details over here. I have showed you examples using a keyword, using a key vault key. And then I have showed you disk encryption. I have showed you storage encryption. As an example of this, the movements shutdown saw and finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.